Good morning. I would like to call the Board of Aldermen Special Meeting Retreat Workshop, February 8th, 2021 to order. Thank you all for being here. We'll have our invocation by Madam Alderman Lowe Davis, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
Let us pray. Almighty, most merciful God, we thank you for the blessings of this day. We ask that you guide us to make good and right decisions for the city of Southport, all who live, work, and visit here. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Thank you, Reverend Davis. Item D, public comment. Anyone here that would like to speak? Okay. I want to thank Mr. Richalt for being here today. Your record is intact, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Item E is the approval of the agenda. I will entertain a motion. Alderman Allen, second by Alderman Lombardi. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Our ethics statement. If any members know of any conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with respect to matters on the agenda, please so state at this time. Any conflicts? Okay. All right. Hearing none, thank you. Item F. And I would like to give a brief introduction in terms of our workshop, which will be facilitated by our city manager, Mr. Gordon Hargrove. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. Again, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. Mark Twain. And that is what we're doing today. Last year, February 1st, 2020, the workshop was facilitated by Mr. Chris May, retired Executive Director of the Cape Fear Council of Government, and Southport's interim city manager, scheduled to start February 18th. At that workshop, we discussed local government, roles of the mayor, alderman, and city manager. We reviewed last year's goals, provided a list for the future, which was also prioritized. The second half of the workshop, reports from department heads. This workshop retreat will be different from last year. Our facilitator will be our city manager, Mr. Gordon Hargrove. It will be more analytical, looking at the budget, which in part helps to determine the goals we can accomplish. So we listen and learn with respect to the financial possibilities as we do the people's business. We will look at CIPs, capital improvement plans, projects, prioritizing long-term and short-term planning, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 years, with respect to budgetary resources and funding. We still face familiar issues: waterfront stabilization, erosion control, infrastructure, roads, building facilities maintenance, sewer. We see pipes being replaced on House Street. We have regionalized our sewer system, a goal accomplished by this board. Now we look 5 years ahead. Our sewer system is upgraded and is taken over by the county. This is just one example of how we move forward with budgetary analysis and planning. We continue to bury power lines, prepare for hurricanes. We're in the process of hiring a building inspector and a city clerk. We have lists and plans: sidewalks, pedestrian economic areas, Yacht Basin Overlay District, Taylor Field, Weather Tower, to name a few. And always, how do we protect the public health of our citizens with respect to the pandemic, and how do we protect our environment and how do we preserve the historic heritage and beauty of our quaint fishing village, while promoting a vibrant economy and successful and robust city government. Today we start, today we begin with long range and short range, critical strategic thinking and planning. So again, I thank you all for being here and for being attentive, and I'll turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Hargrove. Thank you, Mr. Hargrove.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor. As the mayor referenced, last year we went through a team building exercise where I wasn't here, but you folks went through a team building exercise that talked about the morals, values, your expectations of what you would like to see in a mayor, in your elected officials, and your city manager. This year, I decided to go a little bit different direction because you've all already been through this type of exercise. I really feel like you're a very informed board, you're very knowledgeable, and so I wanted to talk about some strategic planning today and how we're going to figure out a path forward. So I'm going to look like Tony Robbins walking around with my microphone, because if I don't talk on it or I don't speak into it, then the people that are watching online will not be able to hear me. So we're going to start out by, I'm going to welcome you to the 2021 board retreat. Mayor Hadom's already had his remarks. I want you to understand, as a city manager, my role is to make sure, number one, to do no harm, okay? To do no harm, we have to really think in a 360-degree perspective of what we're trying to accomplish here in the community. Number two, I think it's the city manager's role and city staff to make sure that the town stays in sound financial condition. And then everything falls in line beyond that. We're going to go over the highlights, the 2021 highlights to date. Then I'm going to have Miss Melanie Trexler, our finance director, talk about our revenue manual. Where do our revenues come from, and how do we build our budget from there? We're also going to go over what is thinking strategically. And then we're going to talk about assessing community needs, some capital project funding. The performance appraisal plan is what we'll talk about next week. And then we're going to talk about a path forward. So our 2019-2020 highlights and review, well, obviously the biggest one that we have is the continued community response to COVID-19. I think we've done an excellent job with our mask mandates. We're still walking hand in hand with the governor's proclamation for the state of emergency. Our parks are still closed. A lot of our community centers and buildings are still closed. And this is all in an effort to keep Southport safe. You as a board have done a fantastic job doing that. Hopefully we can continue this process so that we can get through COVID-19, and on the other side we'll be better for it. A big highlight since I've been here is that we've been able to formalize a sewer agreement with Brunswick County. That was a big thing. That was a big item that was put on my plate when I first started. We've been able to do that, and I think as a board, y'all should be commended for working together to formalize this agreement with the county. We also, you guys, and when I say we, I mean all of us, specifically y'all, because I mean y'all worked on the UDO long before I got here, but we, for the most part, have completed the update for the Unified Development Ordinance. We've also completed the CAMA land use plan. We're just right now at this point waiting for the DCM, or Division of Coastal Management, approval of this plan. We've started the House Street sewer line replacement project. This has come with its own kind of growing pains, as you might say, because we really want to approach this project in a way that we have the least amount of impact on our central business district. As we move forward, we'll try to move this project away from the central business district, which hopefully by the time we get into their peak season, prime season, we'll have the least amount of impact on it. And one I know we're all excited about, we received the CAMA exemption to repair the city dock. That's been a long time coming. It's been an eyesore. Hopefully, the bids are out right now. We'll get those out, we'll get those back, and we'll be able to start that project straight away. With any sort of luck and the weather holds out, we should have that up running by summertime. And I think that will be a wonderful thing because it's an eyesore right now. We also started the development of the Taylor Field Park project, which is going to be a great asset to the community. It's going to have a place where people can gather and enjoy themselves. They can bring their pets, let their pets run, and enjoy the dog park. So we're really excited about this new park amenity coming along. And Hurricane Isaias, what can I say? Everywhere I go, about 3 to 4 weeks after I start, we experience a hurricane. At my last posting, 2 weeks after I started, Hurricane Florence came through. So that was a joy. Then Hurricane Dorian came through. I joined you folks on June 9th of this past year, and I think Isaias was, what was the date? August 3rd. So I am a hurricane magnet. I hope I can stop that. I will make no guarantees. We're also continuing to work on our weather tower replacement. So we are making progress, and I'm happy to say that. So when you look at what we've accomplished over the last year, we have made some significant accomplishments. However, we've got a long way to go. I want to pause for a moment and revisit the City of Southport vision statement. And I'm going to read that. I know you all can read it, but I'm going to read it out loud so that people watching that might not be able to see the slide can see it. It basically says, Southport desires to strive for excellence in our government, project a positive attitude, involve our community, and protect our citizens by ensuring a safe, secure, and tranquil quality of life with controlled and orderly growth. Southport desires to have an affordable quality of life while maintaining its quiet residential atmosphere and protecting the city's historic assets. Population growth should continue at a moderate rate. Southport desires to sustain existing businesses and create new jobs and other businesses. What are our core values here at the City of Southport? To preserve the city's historic character. Also, we want to protect the city's shoreline vista. We have projects right now that directly identify protecting that shoreline vista. We want to continue to support a vibrant central business district, and that's more important now than ever because of the impacts that COVID has had on our business community as well as our residential community. So the decisions that we have to make, we have to be very, very thorough. We have to analyze them from a 360-degree perspective and take everybody into account. We want to preserve the city's residential areas. We want to protect the city's areas of environmental concern consistent with that policy right there. I'm not going to read the numbers. Okay? So before we get started and go any deeper, I want you to know that this is just not me standing up here talking to y'all. If you have a question, I want you to interject. I want this to be a give and take. This is not just me standing up here for the next 450 slides. No, there's 42. So I just thought I'd throw you a little curveball there to see who was still paying attention. So this is a give and take session. This is an interaction. This isn't a Gordon Hargrove playbook. This is your playbook. This is to interact, a chance for us to interact, to figure out a path forward. So at this particular point in time, you know, I'm going to let Melanie Trexler come up here and take the microphone, and we're going to talk about the sources of our revenue.
I am extremely glad to be here today. Yeah, so COVID kind of impacted my household for a few weeks, and I have recovered pretty nicely. It's taken a while, but I am here. So, in a simplistic vision of budgeting is we're required to have a balanced budget. So we have to determine how many revenues we have, and then the departments come up with what they want or need, not necessarily want, because yeah, we want a lot. And then we just massage it till we have a balanced budget. So Gordon had me to put together a little revenue manual that we borrowed from another city in North Carolina, which we do quite often. And it is the revenue manual. I'll put it there on your desk this morning. So, and I'm going to get you to just turn immediately to our revenue history. I put together a little chart there that defines our revenue over the last 6 years. And I'm going to make reference to our audit so that you know where in the audit report the budget shows. So, and it's actually in the very back of the audit report, Exhibit B1. We start with the general fund. The city of Southport has the general fund. We have 2 enterprise funds, which is our electric fund and our water and sewer fund. They operate as a business. And we also, this year, have 3 capital project funds. One being the expansion of Highway 211 and all the underground utility work that's being done. And we have replacement of the sewer line coming down Howe Street as a project with, and that's being partly funded by Golden Leaf. And then the other project is our park with a PARTF grant. So we've got some major activity going on in the city this year and the next year also. So back to the revenue. For the historical revenue, we have, for the general fund, it's categorized as ad valorem tax, which is our property tax. We have other taxes, unrestricted funds, restricted funds, permits and fees, sales and services, miscellaneous, and an interest or investment fund. And if you wanted to see a breakdown of those line items for each of those categories, you can go to your audit, or you can go to your budget workbook that everyone has, you know, at the beginning of our budget year, which is July 1. So over the years, if we take a look at that little chart, in 2017-18, we increased our property tax rate a nickel. And then in 2018-19, we had, let's see, what was that? I was thinking that it could have been the reevaluation. Must have been the reevaluation for the peak increase there. Yes. I didn't look back in the history for that. So that was a significant jump there, and with our increase in our rate, it jumped us up pretty significantly. And so in you look at 2020 and 2021, and you think, well, why is that down? Well, that's down because that's a budget number. That is not a real actual number. That is just the budget for the current year. And we decreased it a little bit due to COVID. And in thinking about that just for a moment, our revenue for ending in December, we only like 35 or 6% more to collect. So, and you know, that was halfway of the year. So we're ahead of the game as far as our budget goes for revenue collection. So I think by our March board meeting, we should be able to adjust our budget for 2021 and reallocate or appropriate some of that money back into the budget for some things that need to happen for the city. Let's see, does anybody have any questions so far? So I was going to tell you what unrestricted revenues were, and they are our local option sales tax, our beer and wine tax, our ABC board distribution money, and our utility franchise tax. And then our restricted money is our PAL bill, our solid waste disposal tax, our FEMA reimbursements and assistance, our fire district fees, and then any other little grants that may come in. And then, of course, permits and fees are building permits, fire inspection fees, golf cart fees, planning and zoning fees. And let's see, other taxes and license are dog taxes, privilege license, peddler permits, and the main one in that one would be the accommodation tax, which has really held up pretty well this year considering COVID. Does anybody have any questions about those?
I know that there's taxes come back to the municipalities through the county, right? From the state, you know, has the big collection and then it is routed back through. And I think there are two different methods counties can distribute funds, something like based on where sales occur or based on population. How do we receive the local sales tax from Brunswick County? What's the formula?
It's per capita.
Per capita, okay.
Mm-hmm. So the county takes in all the, the state takes in all the sales tax, and then they distribute it to the counties, and then the county determines how to distribute it to the municipalities, and we are per capita. So it's everything that is collected, you know, in the county is distributed per capita. So
so just to be clear on that, so that sales taxes, all sales taxes that occur in Brunswick County, we get a pro rata share of that based on our population.
That's right.
Because I think I'm not sure that a lot of people really understand that.
That's right.
It's not just sales tax that occur within the city limits of
That's
Southport.
right.
It's the entire county.
It's through the entire county.
So every dollar in retail spending anywhere in the county has the same value to us as regardless of where it occurs.
That's right. Yep. So currently, our property valuation is not the $845 million. It's $1,032 million is our property valuation that is based that we base our ad valorem tax on. And so just because we've been talking about this, a 1 cent increase in a tax rate would give the city $103,000, okay? So a nickel would give us $516,000 in revenue, additional revenue. Gordon, you have anything you want to say about ad valorem tax and general fund? Let's see. So this little book kind of defines, you know, where and what each of our general fund fees are. and how they're arrived at. Once a year, the league puts out a little book that we use to project or forecast our revenues and how much we're going to get in sales tax. So we pretty much go by that every year to come up with our numbers. Ad valorem tax, we can only budget what we anticipate to collect, which, you know, would be our less our allowance for doubtful accounts.
Go back to occupancy tax for a minute. So how much is the occupancy tax?
Where's Randy? No. I was thinking it was 3%, but I can't remember exactly. What is that number? Of our occupancy? No, we collect our occupancy taxes. I'll tell you what, I'll look it up before I leave here today, because I can't remember exactly.
Curious as to how much it's been run in a year.
Around 100,000, basically off the cuff, is, you could say 100,000. No, occupancy tax, yeah, is different. We keep that. We collect it and keep it. Yep. And we rely on those businesses to pretty much send in their money. Of course, I mean, we could do audits of our businesses, you know, of our accommodations and inns if it would be a difficult task, but it's doable with some added staff. A little hard in a COVID world right now to do that kind of thing, but occupancy tax is, you know, our hotels and bed and breakfasts and Airbnbs and vacation rentals by owners, and those organizations pretty well do a good job of collecting, because when a reservation is made online, then they automatically charge the tax and remit it to us. So if places are using Airbnb and VRBO, then we're getting our money as far as occupancy tax goes.
Melanie, I have a question. You say we get the money as per our population. Is that, I don't know if I really understand this, population for Southport proper or Southport including all the areas of Southport?
Just the city limits,
Just city limits. Okay, thank you.
which I think is currently at 3,600. I think it's pretty close, isn't it? 3,600 residents.
The two ways that counties can choose one of two ways to allocate it, either on the basis of population or on the basis of assessed value of real property. And I think we come out better on population, don't we? It's to our benefit.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't compared the numbers. Okay, does anyone have any questions about the general fund? No? Well, the electric fund. So we are members of the North Carolina Eastern Municipal Power Agency. We buy electricity and we resell it. And we have a district for that, which is a little more than outside of the city limits. I can't tell you exactly how many customers there are at the moment outside of the city limits, but 400 or 500, I think, maybe. I can't remember, but we can figure that out. But so in the revenue book, I kind of found in a publication put out by Electric Cities, which is a little nonprofit organization outside of the NCEMPA, that defined the energy charges, the facility charges, a demand charge, and then the taxes that are collected. The city, some years ago, I think it was back in 2016 maybe, decided to contract out to Brunswick Electric Membership Corporation to do our reading of our meters and our billing and our collecting. So we pay them a fee for that, and they remit the money to us once a month. We still have control over our customers because the customer has to fill out an application at City Hall for service. And once we do that, then we send it over to Brunswick Electric, and they set up the customer, and they pretty well handle all of the complaints or service issues that go along with having a electric company. They also do all of our maintenance on our system, and our system consists of all of our lines in the on the poles and in the ground, and all of the substations. That is ours. So we bill for, the kilowatts, or at least Brunswick Electric bills for the kilowatts for us. We in-house bill for customers who are on our demand billing, which is where larger commercial businesses in town pay a different rate, and North Carolina Municipal, Eastern Municipal Power reads those meters for us and sends us the readings, and then we do the billing on those. And there's about 18 or 19 customers that are on the demand billing that we do monthly. Is there any questions about the electric fund?
Only this references that our bond debt will be paid out in 2025.
Yes.
Is that in our share of NCEMP bond debt?
That's
Okay.
right. That's our share of the North Carolina Eastern Municipal Power Agency bond debt.
When that goes away in 2025, do we anticipate it not coming back? I mean, is that, or, I mean,
Right.
does NCMP, I guess, have some kind of large capital project planned in the future that we'd be responsible for that we know of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Mm-mm. I mean, they sold off their assets for generating power, right?
The debt is related to the asset sale that was done 4 years ago, I think it was. And so right now, things are going to stay flat as far as our rates go from all projections. I mean, energy costs, you can't know for sure until the year gets here. But the discussions at the agency is that everything's going to stay relatively flat until 2025. And then because there's this difference in the collection of money for that debt, you're going to have a little bit of a difference. So then they'll have to figure out something then. But we're not, and there's nothing set in stone right now on how to adjust rates or anything to pay for the cost of purchasing electricity in the future. That'll come up in 2024 or whenever, when we get closer to that debt relief. That makes any sense?
So the bottom line is we would anticipate there probably would be some type of rate reduction in 2025?
Actually, no, because you have about, the way it's structured right now, we're able to cover the cost of the debt and the cost of purchasing energy for all our utility consumers under this group. But without that, you're going to have a change. Different people had different amounts of money they had to pay towards the debt depending on time in the agency and stuff. It's kind of complicated. And so it'll have to be sorted out what that difference is going to mean when you're not all paying towards that debt, towards the greater cost. You're going to have some differences, I think, between the different towns that participate in the agency, and so we'll have to figure out how to make up that difference.
So,
To maintain, because you still have service delivery and things like that you have to maintain. So that it's not a huge amount. It's not even going to be a big amount, but they're just trying to prepare people for the future that we'll have to look at that and figure out what the adjustments are as far as rates and things like that.
they will be putting out a projection in March, and so we will forward that to you if you're not already on their email for receiving their information. Electric Cities does a great job for our town, for the things that they do provide. You know, they have grant money available that they allocate around, and they provide a lot of training resources for us at all levels of business, you know, for the employees, the grounds crew. You know, if we had a grounds crew, they provide training for that. They provide training for office staff. They provide, you know, training for leaders. So it's really a great organization. Any other comments? So I did provide a chart there for the prior 6 years of revenue, and it kind of looks like it just kind of goes up and down, up and down. So over 6 years, it's probably pretty flat. We have not had a rate increase for our customers since I've been here. Well, I think there was maybe a restructure of the rates the year of the sale, but not since then. So I think that was back in 2015, late 2015, early 2016, I think.
Melanie, the Neighbors for Neighbors program, isn't that related to helping people pay
Well, our
their-
Neighbors for Neighbors program, we actually handle in-house. So it's really geared more toward our water and sewer. However, that money could be used. We haven't defined it to be used for electric service, you know, but I mean, we do provide money. You know, the board provides money to Brunswick Family to aid families for utility assistance, and that does include electricity too. They help sewer rate that we had mainly, right? Right. And we're trying to encourage more families to check into that availabilities of those funds, because we have still a good amount of money available for the Neighbors for Neighbors. Sorry.
Do we know why there's a significant drop in 1 year?
Well, the 2021 is just the budget number.
Sorry?
2021 is our budget number. It's not actual money collected. It is our budget. And so we, due to COVID, decided to, go a little more conservative on our revenue estimates.
So that we also dropped 18, 19. We had a drop from 17, 18.
Well, if you look at that across the 5 years, it kind of goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Electricity revenue is so weather related. If you have a hot summer, then you're going to have an increase. And if you have a cold winter. Yeah, so, I mean, if you were to, average that out, I think you'd see a pretty flat line, over the 6 years. Somewhere around $7 million in revenue.
Is this the right time and place to ponder additional sources of revenue, possible additional sources?
Let's talk about
or do we want
the,
to talk about that later on in a different part of the retreat?
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit later on. I want to go out and we're going to talk about some different authorized funding mechanisms that generate revenue. So we're going to go through some of those.
Okay, thank you.
and so then our last enterprise fund is water and sewer. Of course, we are resellers for water from Brunswick County, and for our water and for our sewer, we also contract with Brunswick County to process our sewer for the town. And that is also a little larger than the town, because at one point in time we had a sewer district, and so we still retain those customers for billing purposes. So they are still, so we still have a few more customers than just people within the city limits. So we have inside the city and outside the city. And of course, most recently, Brunswick County is projecting an increase in our water rate that we'll have to entertain an increase coming up. Let's see. So for our water and sewer, I went to the website and actually printed off the document that is printed, that is on the website. So you have that as a separate document here that gives you all the details for our billing and collections revolving around our water and sewer. So water and sewer, if you look at that chart that I had back in the revenues, is kind of broke down between operating and non-operating. And I just wanted to tell you that non-operating would be FEMA reimbursements, and our availability fees are considered non-operating. Now, we do budget in our budget to use those fees that we collect for availability or development. Okay? And we're also in the process, I think last year we were instructed to increase those development fees over a 3-year period up to the rate from our McGill study. I can't remember exactly what those rates were, but I think I have it somewhere in all my stuff. So does anybody have any questions about water and sewer? All right.
So that was good stuff. The key takeaways that we should take away from this are, number one, we have to have a balanced budget every single year. That's a statutory requirement. Our biggest revenues are from our ad valorem taxes, okay, and sales tax. Powell bill money, which is a restricted fund, it can only be used for roads, sidewalks, those sort of particulars. The key thing is that, you know, we have multiple different pots that we can draw from, with sales tax and ad valorem taxes being our largest ones. So thank you very much, Ms. Trexler. So what does all this mean? Why are we talking about this today? So, well, we've got to obviously address or assess community needs and thinking strategically. Why do we need to do this? Is because, do you think that willy-nilly going about playing whack-a-mole, identifying projects and working like that is the strategic way to move forward? Anyone? Anybody think whack-a-mole's the way to go? I don't. So, prioritizing, yes, prioritizing is very important. But I think what we need to do, we need to think beyond prioritizing what we need to do here in the community. We need to think strategically. So what is thinking strategically? It's focus on prioritizing the most pressing needs the community faces that can be funded and completed within a strategic time frame from 1 to 5 years, okay? It could be a 3-year plan. It could be a 5-year plan. We can actually get it into a 7-year plan and 10-year plan, but that actually becomes long-range planning. So what we would like to really identify are projects over the next 3 to 5 years that the community needs and we can fund. That is the key thing right there, is funding. Let's be realistic about what we can fund. And that is thinking strategically. So let's go into a little bit deeper on what is thinking strategically. If you've ever walked into my office, you see me many times sitting there looking like the thinking man. I'm always thinking. So the definition of strategic thinking is simply an intentional and rational thought process that focuses on the analysis of critical factors and variables that will influence the long-term success of a municipality, a team, or an individual. This type of thinking must account for economic realities, market forces, and available resources. Again, we can sit here and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We're going to make Southport more perfect than it already is. But the reality of it is, if we can't fund it, we can't do it. What really frames what we can fund are the market realities. What is the economy doing? And those sort of things. If, like right now, we're in a COVID-related world, people are out of work. Our revenue collection, not revenue, but ad valorem taxes collection, if we're in other parts of the state, might be down a little bit. If people out of the work and they can't pay their taxes, well, they can't. They got to make choices whether they're going to eat, whether they're going to have help, take health care. So we've got to stay grounded in our expectations. Again, strategic planning is an ongoing process that continuously reappropriates resources to initiatives that must be prioritized. I'm going to give you an example. We have a lift station on 9th Street. This lift station has been problematic for the last 4 or 5 years. So why hasn't it been addressed? It's because we've taken other funds and prioritized, or other projects and prioritized those projects ahead of this lift station. However, this lift station has caused us problems with DEQ. So we need to continuously reassess that. So what we did in conversation with Tom Stanley and David Fox is 9th Street Station has continued to get worse. So we refocused our efforts and redirected money to solve that problem. That is ongoing right now. So we continuously look at what we're doing to make sure we have our finger on the pulse of what needs to be done. And again, I've already spoke to you that strategic thinking, we should be thinking in 3 to 5 years long time periods. Why think strategically? Many of the tasks that a municipality undertakes cannot be completed in 12 months. So what happens is we sit down like we did last year and we provide a list of projects that we need to fund, and we just can't get them done in that 1 year time frame. The next year we come back and we create a list of tasks that needs to be done, and we prioritize them again. And it's not really that's kind of the whack-a-mole way of going about addressing our needs. So when we think strategically, we're putting a plan together that we cross over different years to achieve our objectives. Does anybody have any questions about that? Do you understand why we need to think more in the 3 to 5 year time frame as opposed to just on an annual basis? I mean, is that clear? Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. This capacity to plan across multiple years, it's just the right way to move about taking care of business. Otherwise, we end up short-sightedness. Again, I reflect back to the 9th Street lift station, which has been a project 4 years in the making that we have continued to have problems with. I guarantee you next year this time, 9th Street lift station is not going to be a problem, okay? So how do we develop the capacity to plan? We develop capital projects. Capital project is a project that helps maintain or improve a city asset, which is what we call infrastructure. It can be new construction, expansion, renovation or replacement project for an existing facility or infrastructure. Usually the project must have a total, not a total cost of $5,000, I'm sorry, that's a misprint, but a cost over $5,000. Most municipalities have different capitalization thresholds. Here at Southport, I think $5,000 is a good threshold for us, and it also should be a project that will, or an asset that will last more than 1 year. You go to the city of Wilmington, your capitalization threshold might be $500,000 and something that lasts over 3 years. So it's not something that's written in stone. It's something that we as a board and staff, we decide what is our capitalization threshold going to be. So we're talking about all these projects, and Lo, this was right here where you talked about, is it time, how do we fund some of these thresholds? Fund some of these projects. And there's a lot of different ways. The state of North Carolina authorized capital financing mechanisms in different little groups. We can do it from current revenues, which are general fund, basically what we talked about earlier, property taxes, sales and use tax. To fund these projects, you can see what Ms. Trexler just referred to is if we raise our property tax rate, a nickel, what was it? So just a nickel gives us $522,000 to start funding some of these projects. Now, let me be clear. This is a conversation that we have not had. This is just an example. I am not advocating that we raise property taxes. This is just an example, okay? So I don't want everybody going off the side of the road. This is just an example of where we can generate funds. Again, we talked about that we get our current revenues from sales and use tax, enterprise funds, user fees, and other specialty charges. Okay, so I can't see this, so I'm going to have to get either way up here and see if I can see it, which I cannot. So let me give me a moment and let me flip it to on my little flip point. Do y'all have? I'll flip it over here, I think. We'll see. And thank you, Randy, so much for providing these. Has everybody turned to the correct page in your little manual that we handed out? It'll be useful for you to follow along. So where can we pull money from to fund capital projects? We can pull it from our savings. We can pull it from our fund balance. We can pull it from our capital reserve fund. What is a capital reserve fund? It's a capital, we could start a capital reserve fund. This is really what I'm trying to drill down to here today is the capital reserve fund, and start thinking about funding our capital projects through capital reserve funding as opposed to putting it in individual departments. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. A capital reserve fund is something that a municipality's governing board may establish a capital reserve fund and periodically appropriate money to it. A local government may establish and maintain a capital reserve fund for any purpose for which that unit may issue bonds. In order to establish a capital reserve fund, a unit's governing board must adopt an ordinance or resolution that states the following: the purpose for which the fund is being created. A board may accumulate monies for multiple capital projects within a single capital reserve fund, but it must list each project separately. The approximate periods of time during which the monies will be accumulated and expended for each capital project must be specified, and the amounts to be accumulated in each capital project must be specified. The sources from which the money for each purpose will be derived from. A board must indicate the revenue source it intends to allocate to the capital reserve fund to finance each project. Any questions about that? Pardon me?
Need an ordinance then, if we're to go forward with this?
Yes, ma'am, but we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into that a little bit later in this presentation. So yes.
Thank you.
Mechanism that we can use here in Southport are special levies. These are targeted revenue generation mechanisms, such as user charges, that are paid only by the citizens or property owners who most directly benefit from specific services or projects. Special assessment is a charge levied against a property to pay for public improvements that benefit the property.
Can you give us an example of that first one, targeted revenue generation mechanisms that are paid only by the citizens or property owners who most directly benefit?
Let me, can I circle back around to that?
Okay.
And give me a moment to think of an example for you. Exactly, okay, thank you, Alderman
I didn't
Allen.
hear that.
A toll road.
Okay.
Would you like to expand on that? Or would you rather not? Would you rather leave that one alone? Alderman Allen? No, sir. Okay. Other authorized capital financing mechanisms are special taxing districts. Okay, so the state constitution requires that property tax rates be uniform across the city. However, the Constitution authorized the General Assembly to allow a local government unit to carve out one or more areas within the unit as service districts. Examples of a service district are beach erosion and flood and hurricane protection, a downtown revitalization project. Say, for an example, if we wanted to go into our central business district and upgrade everything about it to make it more receptive to visitors visiting our community, we could create a special taxing district in the central business district to fund this project, and we would tax the businesses that are located there. Now again, let me be perfectly clear. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm using that as an example, okay? So we have areas in town that can use to be beefed up for erosion and hurricane prevention. I think we all know where they're at. We could put a special taxing district on that particular parcel in order to improve or prevent or try to prevent erosion and mitigate hurricane damage. That would be an example of a special taxing district. Those of you that were in the Yacht Basin Committee meeting last week kind of understand what I'm driving at here. So that's one example that we can use. We can do urban area revitalization projects, transit-oriented development projects. I think we need a tram here in Southport, don't y'all? Actually, just kidding. We don't need a tram. We promote our community as a walkability, and I think that's where we need to go with that. Drainage projects, stormwater control. Anybody like to make a comment about stormwater control? Do we need stormwater control here in Southport? I know, Mr. Alt, you and I have talked at length about stormwater control. It's obviously a problem, and it's something that we need to address. The only problem that I see with stormwater control is it's not specific to any part of our community. It encompasses our entire community. So that would be something that maybe we would look at in an overall taxing structure. We get off-street parking facilities. Lo, I know that you're interested in something like this. That could be paid for through a special taxing district. Watershed improvements, which go back to stormwater, drainage, and water resources development. A service district is basically a geographic designation, a defined area in which the government levies an extra property tax and provides extra services or undertakes capital projects that more directly benefit the properties in that geographic location. The thing that you have to do when you do something like this is just you have to show how that specific geographic location is different than everyone else. We could not really justify a stormwater special taxing district because it's not anything that is specifically different from the rest of our community. However, we could use funds from a fund balance, our savings account, to address the overall stormwater issues that we have here in Southport. We could do special assessments. They were authorized by the General Assembly in the 2008-2009 legislative session. They're basically titled, if you'd like to look that up, Special Assessments for Critical Infrastructure Needs. Their purpose and intent is to help local units fund public infrastructure projects that benefit new private development. It allows a local government unit to impose assessment with payments spread out over a period of years with the expectation that all or at least a majority of the assessments will be paid by the eventual property owner instead of the developer or the local government. I don't want to do a deep dive into that one right here because that's really not going to apply for us here at Southport. So how do we create a special service taxing district? So if we wanted to go forward and look at a particular geographic location that we wanted to make an improvement on, how do we go about doing that? Well, it's really very simple. It requires a simple action of the board. It does not require a petition or voter referendum. It does require that the board hold a public meeting to discuss what they're wanting to do. The board must find that the district needs to propose services or projects to a greater extent than the rest of the unit. I'm not going to get hung up on that word today, John. So demonstrably, okay. Yeah, something like that. So that's what we spoke about earlier, was that there's got to be a specific need that is different than our entire geographic location. Districts generally must become effective at the beginning of a fiscal year, and the unit must provide, maintain, or let contracts for the services or projects within a reasonable time, not to exceed 1 year after the service district is levied. Guys, I know that I'm throwing a lot at you today about financing, and I don't expect you to understand it all today. Believe me, if we were to move forward with one of these funding mechanisms that we're talking about here, you would learn more about it than you ever wanted to know. This is just kind of skimming the surface to make you aware of what some of our options are. So here we are with the most common method of borrowing money. It's called borrowing money. Why? Why do we borrow money? Because current revenues, nor savings, or even special levies are likely to generate sufficient revenues to finance significant construction projects or capital acquisition. A perfect example of this is our sewer service agreement that we entered into with Brunswick County. In order for us to enter into this agreement, the county required us to contribute to build a new sewer plant or expand sewer operations, because without that, the county couldn't allow us to have our sewer capacity. So we couldn't, there's just no way that we could come up with $25+ million to fund this expansion, no matter what we did, whether we created special assessments, whether we raised I guess we could if we raised our property taxes to sky high, but then we'd all be rode out of town on a rail. So what do? We borrow money. And in this case, we borrowed money from the Division of Water Infrastructure to finance this particular project right at $25 million. When we borrow this money, of course, we're in a contract with them. We have to pay it back. The contract is referred to as a debt instrument or debt security. Okay? So let's talk about bonds. There are 5 different types of bonds. How do bonds work? I got a little ahead of myself, excuse me. Security. Security is the distinguishing feature among the different methods, is the nature of the primary security. The security is the primary security that's pledged by the unit, simply meaning what form of security is the unit pledging. And I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here so I can kind of explain this to you. The most popular bond that most people like to offer are general obligation bonds. Those are the ones that everybody likes to buy because it's backed by the full taxing authority of the local municipality. Security for a debt is defined by the contractual rights of the lender, meaning what the lender can require the borrowing government to do, give up, should it fail to repay the loan. Well, that basically means when we issue a general obligation bond, it is the least riskiest bond out there because the lender can come in, and if we default on that loan or get behind on that loan, they can come in and tell us what to set our property tax rates to in order to repay that loan. Anybody have any questions about that? And I got to take this mask off. The security for borrowing affects what form the loan transaction takes, whether voter approval is required, whether LGC approval is required, and how the bond will be marketed and at what cost. Who are the players in a bond? And this is where, again, I don't want y'all to get all tangled up and deep. This is just kind of an easy dive into it. If we were to ever go this route with any of this, we would get more information than we ever needed to know how we would move forward. There is a bond counsel who is typically an attorney who assists in debt authorization and issuance processes. Their essential role is to issue a legal opinion of the validity of the bond offering. And this happens very early in the process. It's basically a attorney who is counseling us of how the process works. There are financial advisors. They provide local government officials the information needed to make an informed decision. We have underwriters. This is the financial institution that purchases a new issue of municipal securities for resale. We also have rating agencies. They provide an indication of credit worthiness of a government securities. And our favorite, the LGC. They're responsible for the fiscal oversight and also approves most local borrowings and sells bonds on a unit's behalf. So they do work with us. If they approve the bond, they can actually help us sell these bonds. Joint Legislative Committee on Local Government. Okay, so this is basically a study group whose purpose is to review and monitor local government capital projects that both require approval by the LGC and that the debt will exceed $1 million. It's basically a watchdog group. It's the fact checker who checks the fact checker, in other words. Anybody have any questions about the players in the bond market? So we have 5 types of bonds. And when I say bonds, I don't mean bail bonds. Okay? So that's a joke. I would really appreciate a chuckle. Thank you, Tom Lombardi. I really appreciate the chuckle. We have GO bonds, or general obligation bonds. We have revenue bonds, special obligation bonds, project development financing bonds, and installment financing. I'm going to have to take a moment. This doesn't play well on the screen, so if y'all will give me just one moment.
So if we need a bail bond, we can call you. Okay, just checking. So we're good, board.
So a general obligation bond is the strongest form of security a county or city can pledge for debt. It pledges the unit's full faith and credit, making the debt a general obligation of the borrowing unit. All resources of the unit stand behind such a debt. That is why they're so popular. People love to buy them. It's basically one of the strongest investments you can make because you're guaranteed a return on your money. We cannot default on a general obligation bond because that lender can come to us and really require us to do whatever it takes to repay that bond. As we talked about, all bonds have a primary and a secondary security, like I talked about, the primary security for a general obligation bond is the full faith and credit of the unit, basically meaning our taxing power. The secondary security is revenues generated by a revenue generated asset system, which are basically other funds that are non-restricted and not obligated, can be used as a secondary security on those. So I don't know about y'all, this stuff's got me on the edge of my seat, and I'm getting really worked up and excited here, so I'm going to have to catch my breath for a second. So it's time to take a break. And I know y'all are ready for it, although we've got more to come, so don't go away long. Mayor, can you gavel us out for a recess for 10 minutes, please?
recess, and we'll start back with Mr. Hargrove. Thank you, Mr. Hargrove.
Before we move on, why are we talking about all this? It's really because in today's climate, not just here in Southport or in Brunswick County or the state of North Carolina, it's all across the country. Residents are expecting more and more services at the same level of pricing that they're paying right now. So the bottom line is, if you want this level of service, you're going to have to pay this much. But if you're only willing to pay this much, the level of service that you're going to get is going to be this high. So governments today are being asked to do more for less. So what an underarching theme, because I do have an overarching theme to this, the underarching theme is how do we become more resourceful and more efficient with our monies that we take in. We got to make sure that we're using them in the right places, that where it's the most efficient and most equitable for our residents. Before we go to the next slide, Alderman Allen would like to make he brought this to my attention, and since you can tell I'm starting to lose my voice, I'm going to ask him to weigh in on.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out one thing that may help kind of make things a little more clear, possibly, but Gordon was talking earlier about the capital reserve fund, where you just every year you put some money into the capital reserve fund and use that to pay for capital projects. I just wanted to differentiate that a little bit from doing a bond. The capital reserve fund, you can essentially think of as kind of a pay-as-you-go type thing. It's almost like, instead of, taking out a mortgage and taking out a home equity loan to upgrade your kitchen, you start saving $500 a month, then you save up the money, and then you do your kitchen instead of going and putting $10,000 on your home equity loan to do your kitchen immediately. I just wanted to differentiate between those two things. There's obviously, it's great to do pay-as-you-go if you can, but at a certain size project, it's impractical because it'd take you years and years to get enough money to undertake a large project.
Can I ask a question before we start? Is there any possibility that the state or the county would reimburse us, not just Southport local, but people in the outside of Southport that use our city and our infrastructure and spend money in our town, in our city? Why is it limited only to the Southport proper of money that is given back per capita? Is there?
Are you talking about sales tax?
Talking about sales tax. Yeah, we started yesterday.
Well, yeah. Well, understand though that the amount of sales tax collections we get is based on all sales taxes in the county. Now, the amount of, so you got all the sales tax that happens in the county, and we get a portion of it, and it is based on our population. But yeah, I mean, the state law, there's only two ways to distribute sales tax: on the basis of population or the basis of assessed value.
Yeah,
and I don't see that. I mean, there would be a Quixotic quest to try to get that changed.
Yeah, okay. No, I just had to ask that question because it didn't seem logical that they based it only on the city where there's so much more going in that we should be getting more. So that's just a question.
You do get more because the number X is larger because we have tourism versus a town like my hometown of Roanoke Rapids that may not have the beauty of Southport, the tourism, and that type thing. So think of it as, is that right, Alderman Allen? It's a larger number X, and therefore the per capita will be higher.
But we would get
What we
more.
get.
We would still get more if it was based on population. That tax still remained the same, but if we had more
Right, but
population,
everyone
we'd
is,
get a bigger percent.
they're trying to be equitable per capita. Like you said, there's only two mechanisms, and one of them is per capita. but we have this large number, so we do get more
Okay.
money.
All right.
Is that correct, Alderman Allen?
Well, we get more money because we get a percentage of all
Right.
sales taxes in
Yeah,
Brunswick
of
County.
all of it.
But our percentage would be higher if we had more population.
Yes.
Okay.
If I can elaborate, I guess, on Tom's question. People have asked me, how is it that we as the citizens and taxpayers of Southport have to pay so much for to keep our infrastructure up when it's this big influx of people who are beating it up, but we have to pay to keep it up. And I mean, that kind of goes across the board in a lot of the usage. So is that what you were talking about?
Well, not that what we're paying, more or less, it would be a bigger percentage if we'd have more population. That's all, if they would count outside of the city, that's all.
Again, we need to understand, and I'm not defending anything. I'm just saying that we do benefit from the fact that we get a portion of all sales taxes throughout the county. It's not just what happens in the county. We also get other money like Powell bill money from the state, which goes for road maintenance that, at least to some degree, makes us whole for the fact that we have a high number of non-residents driving on our streets, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, but somebody has pointed out to me that we maintain a much larger police force than a town of 3,600 normally would be expected to maintain, and that's because we have so many people in town, almost on a daily basis, and especially when we don't have COVID suppressing the number of visitors. This is just the questions that are asked to me.
Sure.
And I think it'd be good. I don't argue with the answer. I just think it'd be good if we found a way to keep the public informed about why. We've just discussed the answer. Let's share it with the public, maybe in a newsletter, one of our monthly newsletters coming up.
It's frustrating, and in a way, there are only a few major economic engines in Brunswick County. They're all coastal communities. Leland does have a strong commercial area, but our coastal Southport, Oak Island, Ocean Isle Beach, those are our engines. And if we could come to some kind of a measurement of our input into the system and get it prorated as to what we contribute, I think we would come off better. But that sounds like it would have to go to the legislature, and then that would hurt those Navassas and the supplies and the communities. I think we're actually paying for them more than we are getting our fair share. It seems we're definitely a major economic engine in Brunswick County, and I don't think we're getting our fair share. But I think that's the hand that's been dealt to us. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
One last thing. Well, the one way to look at it is if we, as an entity, support the efforts by the county in particular to commercialize, have industry placed on the unincorporated areas, that benefits everybody in the county too from those taxes. So sometimes when we hear about projects that aren't in our city boundaries, maybe we need to be more attentive and, weigh in on those things as far as how that would benefit the county as far as that revenue, because then we would get some of those monies too, and that would maybe help us with our dilemma of, we have this influx of people in our area which causes wear and tear. How do we recoup monies from other sources to help cover those, those costs of our infrastructure? And that would be a way to look at it, I think, is when they talk about, you know, the development of the Route 17 corridor and things like that. You know, do we ever, as individuals, think about that, on how that can benefit us, when, instead of thinking about how far away it is and it doesn't pertain? It does pertain to us. It's more global than we maybe think about sometimes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me, going back to Alderman Lombardi's question, is I think the underlying issue is how do we generate revenue from the people that don't live here, that are using our facilities, using our roads, using our parks, using everything that Southport offers. And it basically comes down to, we don't have taxing authority over them. Yes, our sales tax is wonderful, and it's nice that it comes in. It's one of the biggest, largest revenue streams that we have. But how do we prosper or generate a revenue stream from our visitors? And the only thing that I can think of right now is user fees. So what type of user fees would we look at? We'd look at paid parking. I know you've all looked at and read the paper. A lot of your ocean front communities now are moving toward paid parking. I know that now, I'm not advocating that we do that. I'm just giving you examples. I also, toll roads. It's not unheard of. People are impacting our infrastructure. They're using our water and sewer when they visit us. They're contributing to the load on our streets. How do we pay for that? Should the residents of Southport have to bear that burden by themselves? And no, I don't think so. We've got to think outside of the box of how we can generate different revenue streams as we move forward. Would anybody like to comment on that, or are y'all in agreement that that is something that we're looking at? Or Tom, am I kind of hitting on what you're asking?
Well, I think the easiest way to get revenue would be paid parking. But of course, then where do we put a parking lot? But I think paid parking would give us, that's the easiest way, I think, to get additional monies.
About, I think it was 3, maybe 4 years ago, the state legislature had considered authorizing municipalities to charge a sales tax just with just the city. And it went to committee, and I haven't been able to find it. I asked the league, and I also asked the School of Government if they could track it. I don't have it with me, but I had the bill number. So it may be one of these things that just withered and blew away in committee.
Are you talking about the meals tax? The proposed?
No, I'm not talking about paid meals or paid, what's the topic for that? What? Yeah, prepared meal tax. No, this was actually to authorize municipalities within North Carolina to levy a sales tax, which the city would collect and keep. And so it actually got through the first level and went to committee and then vanished. And of course, this is a state level issue, but it is one that we might want to think about trying to lobby for, pressure for, because this would help us a lot. And then, of course, my next topic was, what was it, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we were talking about the prepared meal tax. And was it the state said we had to do a referendum on it or something?
Yes, that was the ultimate, and we ought to revisit that. We need to revisit that.
Okay.
Because it's something that the municipality can do. It wasn't helpful of what the ultimate result was particularly, so we need to revisit that, because the legislature has the authority to allow us to do it, and it is pretty much a user.
I think that in COVID and this time when we're trying to boost our local businesses, which of course include our restaurants, that this would not be the right time to think about that. But better times are coming, so maybe we would revisit it next year, year after.
I agree 100%. There's a lot of things that we're going to talk about today that really this is an information session, what I call it, and you'll see a slide a little bit later on. It's planting the seed. We're planting the seed for the future. And I want to circle back around for just a moment about parking, paid parking. A lot of the areas that are charging for that are offering free parking for residents. I mean, that we already pay taxes, we shouldn't have to pay for parking. But
Also businesses.
Pardon me?
I think people who work in downtown businesses, for example, should get a permit to park free.
Well, these are all this is just really, we're just scraping the surface right now. But if I recall correctly, when we were doing the UDO, didn't we identify 535 parking spaces that were within a 2 or 3 block from the waterfront? So we've already got a bill. We don't have to build anything for parking. We just have to figure out a path forward. Do we want to charge for parking? And that would really be that revenue stream that we got the folks that visited our community to help contribute to the upkeep of the infrastructure that they have an impact on. And it's already in place. And it's something that I really think that as we move forward, maybe post-COVID, that we identify as a potential revenue stream. Does anybody else have any more questions about the issues we're discussing right now? Great, let's move on. How do y'all like my car at the break? I really thought that was good. And then the coffee time. Do what? No, well, well, I've got a little more hair than that. It seems to be the same color, and I don't have a convertible, Tom. But I do like coffee. So let's go on to the next type of bond. Well, let's go to the requirements of a GO bond. It's the primary authority to incur a general obligation debt is the Local Government Bond Act, which authorizes the issuance of general obligation bonds. Southport can fund with GO bonds. However, the other side of that picture, while it is the best bond to use, you must have voter approval. And that tends to be difficult even when what you're trying to get approval for is very popular, like a park, a greenway, things of those nature that the public supports. It's still very difficult to get approval for that sort of thing, let alone it's for infrastructure that we can't see in the ground, water and sewer. Those are just not glamorous projects that people want to fund. They're out of sight, out of mind.
Gordon, do we have any GO bond debt currently? I didn't think so.
Okay, so for y'all that didn't hear that, we have no general obligation bonds out at the moment. Our new debt
Have we ever tried to issue them? Have we ever put this to the voters? I don't recall in my deep dive into our minutes of ever seeing it. Anybody know?
Can't answer that question. That would take someone that's been here a whole lot longer than I have. So, new debt can't exceed 8% of appraised value of property subject to taxation by the unit. That's what you and I were talking about a little bit earlier. Due to the need for voter approval, local units often look to other forms of lending. Revenue bonds. Revenue bonds are basically revenue generated by a revenue generated asset or system. Asset or part of an asset being financed. Say for an example, we did a revenue bond to do our water and sewer or a pier, and we charged for people to go on that pier. Our security is going to be the proceeds that we generate from people using that pier. Special obligation bonds. We can use any revenues, any unrestricted revenues other than unit levied taxes as our primary security. We can use part of the asset. Let's say we build a new community center. We can use that as part of that, the backing, the collateral, so to speak, of that building. Project development financing bonds. This is an incremental increase in property tax revenue within a defined area due to new private development. John, you and I spoke about that at the break. Assets or part of asset being financed, any unrestricted revenues other than unit levied taxes, special assessments. We can also look at installment financing. It's the asset or part of asset being financed. Project development financing is a method of increasing the overall property value in a currently blighted, depressed, or undeveloped area within a city. A unit borrows money to fund public improvements within the designated area with the goal of attracting private investment. The debt incurred by funding the improvements is secure and repaid by tax increment revenue. Basically, when we improve the area, the increased values, the additional property taxes resulting from the district's new development is how we fund that.
I think, just to be clear, I think you got the wrong title on that. That's not installment financing. That's basically a continuation of the project development financing on the previous page, just so everybody knows.
I might have missed that one. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Installment financing. It's the most common borrowing structure used by North Carolina governments. It does not involve the issuance of bonds. Municipalities in North Carolina are authorized to borrow money by entering into installment financing agreements. Installment agreement is a loan transaction in which a local government borrows money to finance or refinance the purchase of a capital asset, be it real or personal property, or the construction or repair of fixtures or improvements on real property owned by the local unit. When we do that, we may not grant a security interest in any other property that the city owns other than that which is being financed. For an example, perfect case here is we borrow money to build a new public works building out on the 440 acres, which hopefully will be 40 acres. And we cannot use as collateral the interest, the equity that we have in this building as collateral for that unit. So what does this all mean? Can anybody tell me? What does this all mean? Why did I go over this today? What's my point that I'm trying to make here?
Long-term planning.
Exactly right. While a lot of this does not apply to us today, it's something that we have to plant a seed about and water it and nurture it and grow it so that we can make Southport and keep Southport one of the best places or the best place in Brunswick County to live. It's the whole purpose of this. Here's my seed that I'm planting. That's what we're doing today. I'm planting a seed with you, anyone that's watching, of how we're going to move forward. So what can we do now? Are we going to be like an elephant sitting on a bench and just watch time go by? Or are we going to start moving forward? Mayor, what was your quote earlier this morning from Mark Twain? Can you repeat that for me? We're getting started, absolutely. And you would have thought that the mayor and I tag teamed on this to get to this point. We did not. But I love that quote. Let's discuss some pressing needs, and this is where we're going to get into some audience participation. What kind of problems do we face here in Southport? Well, obviously, we're kind of the nose of North Carolina, maybe not quite like the Outer Banks, but we're still maybe a nostril, and we seem to be a magnet for every hurricane that likes to come this way. So we've got to be prepared for that moving forward. How do we make our community resilient, and how do we mitigate the impacts that these type of storms cause us? And it doesn't have to be a hurricane. It can be a nor'easter. It could be, heck, we have flooding issues when we have a significant amount of rain in a short period of time. We have infrastructure in the ground. And actually, I think that picture right there makes some of it look good. We've got infrastructure in the ground that's over 100 years old. Gonna have to do something about it. How are we gonna finance it? How are we gonna make these improvements? We've got erosion. Now, I know some of y'all, we hope it doesn't get to that point. We're trying to make sure it doesn't get to that point, but we've got some areas that realistically with a bad enough storm could look like that. And let's talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. Roads. We've got some road issues, don't we? We need to repair some roads. So the next slide, I think we can all agree these are some pressing issues. So what I would like you to do is take a few minutes right now and think about some of the pressing issues that you've heard about, that you've discovered in your role as an alderman or mayor. Complaints that you've heard from residents. Take 5-10 minutes, write these down, and when we come back, we're going to put them up here on my little easel, my little pad, and we're going to talk about them. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Don't. And we'll come back. I've got you on the clock. It is now, well, I'm going to have to look at my phone. I believe my wristwatch is a little slow. So let's come back at 11:16. Okay, let's come back together. Randy, Lisa, are you ready? Okay, so let's talk. I love my picture up there of the let's talk. Wonder why she has a bullhorn. So we always, well, I don't know who we always start with, but we're going to start with Alderman Allen today, and talk about some of the concerns, some of the pressing issues that you think the city of Southport faces, and Thomas will write them down for us.
Okay. So I actually had done this before I came in here today. So I've got implement the waterfront stabilization project, which I guess is largely based on is it the 2017 plan? Is that when that plan was done? When was it?
2019.
2019. We'll look at it later. Then I've got implement and keep continuing the theme of implementing plans that we have. We implement the pedestrian safety plan, which I think calls for various crosswalks and traffic calming devices. I think it's been a while, frankly, since I've even looked at it, but it has some good stuff in it that would help us, I think, a lot on pedestrian safety. And along those same lines, the funds to finish the sidewalk project on House Street. And I've got stormwater improvements. We've got some areas that obviously have tremendous issues with stormwater drainage. And I've got the construction of the kayak launch down at the marina, where the marina gave us an easement when we sold the old wastewater treatment plant. So we can build I guess we'd build a walkway and a kayak launch down there on Cottage Creek. That's all I had.
Great. I like all of Alderman Allen's there. I don't want to steal from him though. I think at the top of my list that we do agree on is the shoreline stabilization. So that is top. Storm drainage, sewer system infrastructure, power redundancy, and underground, continuing putting things underground. And this is a big issue that I don't know we could solve, but economic diversity, and that would be housing, jobs, and opportunities. I think those are the major elephants in the room. The launches, the crosswalks, those are all great, but I'm gonna stick with the 5. You need help with that, Thomas? You need me to repeat any of that? Diversity, yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna phrase it in terms of like problems or needs and not refer to a particular plan. Reducing our risk of erosion of our shoreline and flooding of our streets that are that are along the shoreline. So I think that the stabilization plan that we adopted as an engineering thing is a component of that, but I think there might be other things that we have to look at. And that's why I'm more or less stating situations or needs, I think. So, water quality, fresh, our drinking water quality, and some of it is actually, what is the condition of the water when it comes out somebody's tap in their house? There's odor issues, there's discoloration. So I don't know what, that there's a particular plan to address it, but it's a needs. Sewer, eliminating spills, making it more storm resilient, our sewage collection system. Another resiliency issue is stormwater management, so that our roads aren't flooded, people can pass through them, properties, hopefully, maybe we can reduce the flooding of properties. We have concerns about streets, whether it's the condition of the streets or the safety of the streets for people that are walking or riding bicycles. And the other needs that I've heard expressed is recreation facilities for youth as well as older folks. So how do we provide indoor type of fitness opportunities? Last thing I would say from my perspective, it's not something that's been brought to me by the public, but what's our future workspace needs for the city employees? What facilities are anticipated in the future? What do we think our growth is going to be? How many employees are we going to have, and how are we going to house them and give them a productive place to work?
I also had on my list, and I just quickly, the waterfront stabilization, the erosion control, how to protect and prevent that. Pedestrian economic areas, the crosswalks, that's a 5 to 10 year project. We have more than one crosswalk, sidewalks, that type thing. So it's going to take more than 12 months to do that. My overriding, I look at it from a bigger picture, and this is a constant project, is the public health aspect, which is always my number one concern, how to promote and protect our city and our citizens. And that is whether it's the environment, clean water, clean air, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's making sure that our fire, police, and rescue, the strength of these departments, our hurricane preparedness. So I put that under that one category. Also, just from what we've talked about today, how do we increase revenue? That should be one of the top things on our list. I also have historic preservation of the town, of our city. And again, another overriding topic, and again, is how I look at things. How do we enhance the quality of life of our citizens? And that encompasses many things. And I know it's a general topic, but that's how I think. Our economy, tourism, our yacht basin, our business district. How do we promote that? it's just vital to our city. And then I look at it again in a larger topic, infrastructure. Burying the power lines was mentioned. The sewer was mentioned. That project is going well. Our roads, again, that was mentioned, and I have that down. And our facilities, that's just so important. Whether it's, and y'all have already mentioned that, but a 3-year project, 5-year project, expanding the community building. What can we do for City Gym? How do we get that courthouse back to where we can actually have meetings there instead of here in the community building? How do we maintain our facilities? These are, some of the issues that I think are important, and I agree with those that have already been listed. Other things, just briefly, how do we work with Brunswick Community College to develop their facility on Lord Street for educational purposes, for exercise purposes? And, exercise is so vital to our health. So we have Taylor Field that will be of benefit. A pool. There's been a group that's been advocating a pool. That's not a 12-month project. That could be a 3 to 5 year project. And lastly, what can we do to help Southport Marina, and again, our whole waterfront? What can we do to make sure that our waterfront is vital with its beauty, as well as its economic factors? So that's what I have.
Okay. I'm not going to plow ground that's already been plowed. I agree with just about everything that everybody else has said thus far. So, and I had divided my list into pressing needs, stuff we've really got to get on quick, and the things that I want us to do. And in the pressing needs, of course, there's mitigating storm impacts, erosion control, roads. To that, I might add sidewalk maintenance. If you walk our sidewalks, you better be looking down most of the time instead of looking around at the pretty scenery, or you're going to, do a face plant pretty fast. We really need to look at our sidewalks. And underground utilities, especially electric, the thing that hits everybody first and hardest after hurricanes is loss of power. And it's not always because something in the city went down or is affected, of course, as we've learned, but at least within the city, if we're below ground, we don't have to worry about tree limbs falling on our power lines. Two things that I think we need to get on right away, as I said, is right of way, protecting our right of way, and I've got some ideas about how we might go about that. We see the encroachment and taking over of city right of way all over the city, and of course we cannot go after one individual if we're not going after everybody on this, and we got to be even-handed, and that is not going to be easy, but there are ways to do it, and we can talk about that later. And also short-term rentals. That is probably the number one thing I hear from constituents, complaining about when is the city going to do something about this. This house next door to me just got sold. The people who bought it are never going to live there. They've turned it into a short-term vacation rental business. And then they go on to elaborate about all the problems that involves. So short-term rentals, right-of-way protections, sidewalk maintenance, and most of you know, I think, that there is a petition and a strong movement to try to talk the county into building an indoor pool in or close to Southport, next to the park out there on River Road. The county does own property there. It's a good location for it, but to the extent that we can throw our weight behind this as a project, that would be great for the health of our citizens. I want a kayak launch. I want a nature park. I want to find more ways to protect our open spaces. I want to see raised boardwalks wherever we have problems with pedestrian safety, like in the yacht basin and on West Brunswick Street, and maybe all the way down to the kayak launch. But those fell under my list of wants, not immediate needs. The mitigating storm impacts and erosion control and roads are probably the number one most pressing needs, followed closely by everything else.
Gordon, can I interject something real quick? Did you have in mind that we were primarily going to just be focused on capital projects for this thing, as opposed to some of the items that are coming up are, I wouldn't really call a capital project? Are you looking for capital projects, or are we talking about everything?
Well, we're primarily concerned with capital projects, but we can discuss policy, short-term rentals, and infringement or encroachment into our right-of-ways are policy decisions that, as we move forward, we need to talk about. But primarily, capital projects. So, but I think this, if you want to say something about a policy, I think it's certainly appropriate to discuss it now.
Yeah, I certainly agree with everything that was said previous, but the most that I've heard about since I've been here for the year are street repairs, and people call me, maybe they associate me with roads, and I guess because I talk about it all the time. Let's say flooding was probably the biggest concern I've heard about. You can put all the pipe and catch basins you want all over the city, but where does all this water go? Does it go to the river that gets flooded and backs up the water? And so maybe we need some pump stations. Maybe that's, a solution. Local street repairs have been also a strong point that people have talked about. And I think we should do a little bit, like I said before, not go into it doing all the streets and repairing them all at one time, but doing a little bit at a time. Put together a patching crew within the city, 3 men, a truck, and a truck driver, and once a week go out and patch. And I think that this manual that I keep talking about that we're working on, it gives you the procedure of patching a road and materials to use, and that the patch will last and not fall apart in 6 months. Sidewalk extensions and repair was another big area that people have called me on, and also underground, and it's been mentioned before. But I think street repair and flooding was the 2 biggest discussions I had, and many discussions with citizens of Southport. So I think we should do a little bit, maybe not a lot, but start with a little bit and start getting it done. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Everything's been pretty much named in one form or another, so obviously waterfront stabilization is the #1 key. If we don't have our waterfront, then we're Columbus County. So that would be the #1 item, and that's most readily identifiable by everybody, but certainly storm resiliency, all of that sort of wraps into that to a certain extent, and is an extension of that. Our roads, we all know what our roads, we hear about those and issues. To John's point about our pedestrian safety, and a lot of everybody else has talked about that. Connectivity also is part of that safety, and we have plans for that. We have a pedestrian plan, a huge document that we can prioritize and help find our way with that. So those, I mean, everything's really been named. I do want to name specifically the Public Works facility. It is going to have to be replaced. We've known that for some time. So that is a very tangible, real item we can make a plan for, because we're going to have a plan for it in the nearer term rather than the longer term. So those, I mean, I could relist what everybody said, but I think we have the list.
Great, thank you. Thomas, thank you. So as we're discussing all these topics, can someone here tell me what the underlying theme that ties all these projects together is? Money. So, how are we going to finance it? It's not something we're going to be able to do in a year. So, what do? Well, we either have to, we're going to have to increase revenues one way or another. So we're going to have to think outside of the box about what we're going to do. Maybe parking is something that we need to visit. As you can see, we've got a lot of issues. What can we realistically fund? Again, our community expects this level of services for this amount of money. What I'd like you to think about, and the seed that I'd like to plant today, is creating a project ordinance. What does a project ordinance do, or really how do we go about that? We can adopt a project ordinance at any regular or special meeting by a simple majority of the board, by a simple majority of board members, as long as there is a quorum present. It can be done any time of the year. The ordinance must, number one, clearly identify the project and authorize its undertakings. 2, identify the revenues that will finance the project. And 3, make the appropriations necessary to complete the project. How do we go about it? Capital Improvements Fund. I think we already have a few. So I'm asking you to consider adding more. And some of these projects that we're going to fund, we're going to slip in there. We're going to figure out what are the most pressing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this list and I'm going to compile all that information, and I'm going to send it back out to you at the latter part of this week, okay? So that we can start thinking strategically how we're going to do it. But what we've got to do, Mayor, what did Mark Twain say? We got to get started, okay? So why do we want to get started? Because we're tired. We don't want to play whack-a-mole. We don't want to make decisions willy-nilly. We want to have a clear picture of a path forward that we're going to use over the next 3 to 5 years. A capital improvement fund, in my opinion, one of its biggest and most valuable contributions to a community that it has is that it binds boards together. We put money in a fund that we pay as we go, and our board, fortunately or unfortunately, every 2 years changes. When we have money in a capital improvement fund, that money stays in that fund. It cannot be retrieved for anything else other than that capital improvement. It allows for better short and long-term planning. That's the bottom line. And as we think about it, I'm not going to say strategic planning because we're not at that level yet, but we are scratching the surface for strategic thinking, okay? We will move as we drill deeper and take a deeper dive into thinking strategically, develop a strategic plan that has a 3, 5, 7, and 10-year mark. And it's something that this board and Mayor Hayden will all be instrumental in creating so that we can find that path forward to continue to make Southport the best place. Well, let's just say in Brunswick County, we know, but maybe even the whole state of North Carolina and the East Coast. Let's just put that out there. To keep Southport, well, what's the signs out there? Don't change Southport, let Southport change you. In order to do that, we got to keep Southport looking good, right? When we put money into a capital improvement fund, okay, we are taking it out of the individual departments, okay, and we're putting it into this fund. Doesn't mean those individual departments can't withdraw those funds, but what it does is it makes their funding, how they develop their budgets every year, makes it a little bit easier on them, because you, the board, takes these ideas and we fund it, okay? So it keeps any individual department from their budget looking very bloated in a year. Let's say we're gonna spend $100 million replacing the streets. Now we know that's not all possible, but that would make public services, the streets department look very bloated for that year, okay? It allows for better identification and the public visibility of the projects. Unspent funds can be rolled over from year to year. That's what we're talking about. It binds boards together. So after next year's elections, I don't know what the outcome will be, but if there's new sitting members here, then they will be bound to that capital improvement fund and what you have already funded. Now, they may choose not to fund it anymore, but they can't use that fund for anything else but what it's been put in there for.
Can
And
they reduce it?
Do what?
Can they reduce it?
They could, yes, they could reduce it. They could not fund it. They could choose to fund more. But I think as we go about developing this strategic plan, I don't know why anybody would want to reduce it or eliminate it. I mean, if there is a need, why would you do such a thing? Remember what we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation was strategic thinking. It was being able to think on your feet, reprioritize, and use our resources where they're most needed. The 9th Street lift station, 4 spills in the last 3 years. Warnings from DEQ. Should that have already been taken care of before I got here? Anybody can answer that. It's not a trick question. Should that have already been taken care of before I got here? Absolutely. Okay? So we reallocated the funding for that. So, but what it does, hopefully it creates a consistency of how we're moving in this path forward. Okay? That's how we do it with limited resources. I want to tell a little story. When I decided to do a career change, I was talking with a friend of mine, and he didn't know I was contemplating a career change, but he had a significant impact to his business. And one of his primary pieces that he sold, you couldn't sell it anymore. The government had taken it away from it. So he was asking me business questions, and we were sitting there with our feet dangling in a pool one day, and he said, "Gordon, what do you really want to do in the future?" And I had made the comment that I was kind of burnt out on being in the private sector, and I think I've explained to all of y'all during my interview process that I've always wanted to be a city manager. It's something that actually that I think I'm built for. And I said, but it'll take me 5 years to get my master's degree. And he asked me, he said, well, in 5 years, if you don't go back to school, what's going to happen? I said, I don't know. He said, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Time is going to pass. And in 5 years, you're going to be sitting right where you are now. He said, so why don't you undertake it, go back to school, and in 5 years, you'll have your master's degree. My point being that I'm trying to make, in 3 years, 3 years are going to have passed. In 5 years, 5 years are going to have passed. 7 years, 7 years are going to have passed. In 10 years, 10 years are going to have passed. Regardless of what we do here today moving forward, time is going to pass. So let's take advantage of that and make it work for us. Let's put these things in motion that we need to accomplish to make Southport a better place. Does that make sense to everybody? Is that pretty clear? That's kind of a hard concept for me to speak to you about, but time's going to go by, whether we do anything or not. Let's be proactive. Let's use the resources that we have to accomplish the most that we can. So the CI Capital Improvement Fund, revenues and appropriations for designated capital projects would be placed in this fund, which could only be used for improvements which repair or increase the long-term capital asset base of the city. I took a long way to get there because I want you to know that there are other revenue streams out there than just savings, because as a pay-as-you-go is kind of a savings account. If we only put $100,000 in year one, we put $100,000 in year two, and we put $100,000 in year three, and let's say we've designated that for, I heard a theme here today, pedestrian walkways, sidewalks. Guess what? We might not be able to address that this year or next year, but in year three, we're going to have $300,000 that we're going to be able to do some crosswalks. The same thing with any of these other projects right here. I'm going to take this list right here and I'm going to compile it into a report. And I'm going to try to monetize what it's going to cost. And then some of the vehicles that we have access to accomplish these goals. Number one amongst them, Capital Improvement Fund. Number two, I think we need to think about special taxing districts. Number three, I'm not advocating this. This is something that we'll have a discussion as we move forward, as we do a deep dive into the budget. It might be time to think about seeing how our property tax rates relate to our needs. Nobody likes to raise taxes, but it's a fact of life. If you want this level of service, you got to pay this level of money. If you're only willing to pay this level of money, you're only going to get this level of service. Remember what I spoke about when we first started this meeting was everybody expects more for less. We can do some of that through efficiency, but we can only get so far with efficiency. The rest of it's going to be making hard decisions, and those are the decisions that come down to y'all. The one thing that I want you to get out of this meeting today, we need to start the Capital Improvement Fund, and we need to list those, and what I'll do is I'll put those into a form that you can see on an email or an attachment, and how much we should allocate to it as we move forward. And so with that being said, I want to touch base and close out the meeting today on our budget calendar. So this is what the School of Government says. We don't have to go exactly by this timeline, but on April 30th, our department requests must be submitted to the budget officer. June 1st, the proposed budget must be presented to the governing board. And after the proposed budget is presented to the governing board, but before adoption, has to be noticed in public hearing. And then on July 1, we must adopt the budget ordinance. We're getting started really early this year. So we're going to meet next week. We can come back and revisit any of this. What I'm going to ask you to do is if you have any questions about anything that we've discussed today, send them to me in an email by Thursday afternoon so that I can work with the city staff to get your answers. Okay? We can go over that next Monday if you want to, but the primary point of next week's meeting will be to kind of do a follow-up on this, and then to start looking at our performance appraisal system, and to go over that and how we'll move forward with that. Does anybody have any questions for me? I hope today was informative. I know financing can kind of get in the weeds a little bit. I know Melanie and myself, we get excited about when we talk about money. Some other people, their eyes glaze over. It's not the most, well, how would you say it, glamorous aspect of government, but you know, I kind of enjoy it. It's probably good for y'all that we do. So if no one has any more questions, that's all I have for today.
All right, that was amazing. Mr. Hargrove, that was just absolutely amazing, and not only informative, to me it was glamorous. Anytime anybody can teach me something new, you know, learning is one of the keys to life, and I know I've learned some things today. I appreciate the way the board has participated in this process. That's very important. Appreciate Mr. Alt being here. First Lady, thank you for being here. This is a great first step. This is a great way to get started, and so I appreciate that. City Manager, do you have any further comments? Otherwise, we'll do board comments. Mr. Allen? Mr. Spencer? Alderman Sharkey? Madam Lowe Davis? Mr. Lombardi? Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Lombardi, second? Second, Mr. Allen. All in favor? Meeting adjourned.